Have you ever wondered what your life would look like if you could start over, leaving behind choices that brought pain or regret? Today, we're diving into the story of Amos, the humble prophet from Judah who, without status or wealth, confronted an entire nation's sins. Amos shows us that true strength sometimes lies in recognizing our mistakes and seeking a path toward change. In a world where everything seems fast-paced and values often feel like they're slipping through the cracks, the story of Amos stands as a powerful reminder of what it means to truly reflect, reevaluate, and reset. Amos wasn't a man of prestige or influence, he was just an ordinary shepherd from the region of Judah. But he was a man with a voice that called out boldly for change, for repentance, and for justice. He saw his people, who once held a close relationship with God, drifting away, caught up in selfish desires and ignoring the moral compass that once guided them. Amos' story brings us back to something fundamental, the power of self-reflection and accountability. His message wasn't just a wake-up call for the ancient kingdom of Israel, it's a timeless reminder for each of us today. When we look at Amos, we don't just see a prophet. We see someone who challenges us to look inward, to confront the uncomfortable truths, and to realign ourselves with values that bring depth and meaning to our lives. Who was Amos? Amos wasn't born into a family of prophets or priests, nor did he come from a place of high status. He was a shepherd, tending to flocks and working the land in a small village called Tekoa, in the southern kingdom of Judah. His life was humble, grounded, and far removed from the halls of power. Yet, he was called by God to leave behind the comfort of his everyday life to deliver a critical message to the neighboring kingdom of Israel, a message that would demand their attention and challenge their way of life. Imagine the world Amos lived in. The kingdom of Israel was thriving economically, and the people enjoyed a sense of security and abundance. On the surface, it looked like a golden age. But beneath this prosperity, Amos saw something deeply troubling. The people had grown complacent, their leaders corrupt, and their devotion to God replaced by a pursuit of wealth and status. Society had become divided, with the rich oppressing the poor and justice falling by the wayside. For many, religion had become a hollow ritual, devoid of true meaning or devotion. Amos was called to be the voice of change, someone who would speak truth to power. Unlike prophets who might have been more polished in their approach, Amos was raw and straightforward. His background as a simple farmer and shepherd made him uniquely relatable to the common people, and his humility only strengthened his credibility. He wasn't preaching for fame or fortune, he was there because he felt a deep sense of duty to share God's warning and urge people to change their ways before it was too late. The setting of Amos' mission is crucial to understanding his story. The kingdom of Israel, though flourishing, was drifting further and further from its spiritual foundation. Their priorities had shifted away from justice, mercy, and humility before God. Amos stepped into this environment with a message that cut straight to the heart of their issues, confronting the people and their leaders with a boldness that couldn't be ignored. It was a message that both shocked and unsettled, exposing the moral decay that lay hidden beneath their outward success. Amos' story shows us that sometimes the most powerful messages come from the least expected places. Here was a man who, despite his humble beginnings, was willing to stand up and speak out against corruption, hypocrisy, and injustice. He became a voice for those who were silenced and forgotten, and a beacon of truth in a society that desperately needed it. And in doing so, Amos reminds us that purpose isn't always found in comfort or in following the status quo. Sometimes, it's found in stepping out of our comfort zones and being willing to confront what's wrong, even when it's difficult. As we dive deeper into Amos' message, we'll see that his life was more than just a call to repentance for his people, it's a call for us, too. Amos challenges each of us to be aware of the impact our choices have on those around us, to reject complacency, and to embrace a life aligned with truth and justice. He invites us to ask ourselves, are we living a life that reflects our deepest values? And if not, are we willing to make the changes needed to get there? The message of Amos, repentance and justice, 900 words. Amos' message was as bold as it was uncompromising. He didn't come to Israel with polite suggestions or gentle reminders. Instead, he delivered a powerful call to repentance, challenging the very foundation of the nation's moral and spiritual fabric. At the heart of Amos' prophecy were two essential themes: the need for sincere repentance and a call for justice. As Amos stood before the people of Israel, he spoke to their hearts and their conscience. He called out the complacency that had taken root in their society, the injustice that was all too often ignored, and the hollow rituals that had replaced true worship. Amos wasn't interested in appearances, he was interested in transformation. He urged the people to turn back to God, not just with empty words but with a genuine change in their hearts and actions. One of the most striking aspects of Amos' message was his focus on justice. He condemned the wealthy and powerful who exploited the poor and oppressed. In Israel, there was a clear divide between the rich and the poor, and Amos saw how this gap was leading to systemic injustice. He denounced the leaders and elites who enjoyed luxuries while ignoring the suffering of the less fortunate. For Amos, true worship of God wasn't about grand ceremonies or impressive displays, it was about treating others with fairness, mercy, and compassion. Amos famously declared, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." This powerful image captures the essence of his call: justice and righteousness weren't optional. They were the core of a society that truly honored God. Amos urged the people to let justice flow naturally, to make it an inseparable part of their daily lives. He challenged them to create a society where everyone, regardless of their status or background, was treated with dignity and respect. In calling for repentance, Amos didn't shy away from the consequences of ignoring God's call. He warned the people of Israel that their choices had consequences and that their actions would ultimately lead to judgment if they didn't turn back to God. This wasn't a threat, it was a heartfelt plea for the people to recognize the path they were on and the inevitable outcome if they continued down it. Amos was giving them an opportunity to change, to avoid the suffering that awaited if they continued in their selfish ways. Through Amos, we see that repentance isn't just about feeling sorry, it's about changing direction. It's about examining our lives, recognizing where we've strayed, and making a conscious decision to align our actions with our values. For Amos, repentance wasn't a one-time act, it was a continuous process of self-examination and growth. He reminded the people that true repentance involves both a turning away from what is wrong and a turning toward what is right. Today, Amos' message remains as relevant as ever. We live in a world where injustice often goes unchallenged, where people can easily become focused on personal gain at the expense of others, and where the value of a person is sometimes measured by their wealth rather than their character. Amos calls us to take a hard look at our own lives and the society we live in. Are we seeking justice and treating others with respect, or have we allowed ourselves to become indifferent to the struggles of those around us? Amos' message is a reminder that faith and action are intertwined. It's not enough to simply profess our beliefs, we must live them out in a way that uplifts others and promotes justice. When we choose compassion, when we stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, we honor God in a way that goes beyond words. Through his powerful words, Amos invites us to embrace a life of authenticity, integrity, and love for others. As we move forward, let's keep this challenge in mind. Amos' message isn't just for the people of his time, it's a call to each of us to consider how we can bring justice and righteousness into our own lives. It's an invitation to make choices that reflect our deepest values and to live in a way that honors not only God but also the humanity we share with others. Are we ready to answer that call? The relevance of repentance today. Repentance might seem like an old-fashioned concept, but it's incredibly relevant in today's world. In a culture that often promotes instant gratification and self-centered goals, repentance calls us to pause, reflect, and realign with a greater purpose. For Amos, repentance wasn't merely about expressing regret, it was about a meaningful transformation, changing direction in life to seek a path that aligns with justice, compassion, and authenticity. Today, this idea of repentance is not only applicable but essential for personal growth. Life moves fast, and in the rush to achieve success or meet social expectations, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters. We make mistakes, fall into habits, and sometimes hurt others, intentionally or not. Repentance offers a way out of this cycle. It's an opportunity to stop and ask ourselves some crucial questions. Are we living according to our values? Are we treating others with respect and kindness? Have we strayed from the person we aspire to be? In today's world, repentance can also mean taking accountability. Instead of justifying our actions or blaming others, repentance involves taking responsibility for our behavior. It's a process that encourages humility and fosters a sense of empathy, as it requires us to see how our actions affect others. For young people navigating the complexities of modern life, this practice of repentance can be a powerful tool for growth and self-discovery. Imagine a situation in which we realize we've made a poor choice, perhaps something that hurt a friend or contradicted our beliefs. Repentance gives us a framework to not only feel remorse but also to actively seek change. This doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but it does mean we're committed to being better. Through repentance, we recognize our flaws and mistakes and use them as stepping stones toward a more authentic self. Moreover, repentance is deeply empowering because it allows us to let go of guilt. We all make mistakes, and guilt can easily become a heavy burden that holds us back. Repentance helps to release that weight by offering a path to forgiveness and renewal. When we acknowledge our wrongs and strive to correct them, we move forward with a clearer conscience and a stronger sense of purpose. In today's digital world, where our lives are often on display, the concept of repentance also encourages us to be genuine. Social media can create a pressure to present an idealized version of ourselves, but repentance calls us to embrace our imperfections. It's a reminder that we don't have to hide our mistakes or pretend to be flawless. By embracing repentance, we learn to value honesty and humility over appearances. Repentance also leads us to compassion. When we go through the process of acknowledging our faults and seeking forgiveness, we become more understanding of others' struggles. It becomes easier to extend grace to those around us, recognizing that everyone is on their own journey. Instead of judging others, repentance teaches us to support and uplift them, knowing that we've been in similar places ourselves. Amos' message of repentance is a call to develop a lifestyle that values introspection and change. He showed that repentance is a vital part of a relationship with God, as it draws us closer to a life aligned with divine values. This journey isn't always easy, but it is rewarding. Every time we make an effort to examine our actions and correct our course, we're taking a step toward a more meaningful life. Today, repentance remains a powerful process of self-renewal and transformation. It's a reminder that no matter where we are in life, we always have the choice to change direction, to let go of past mistakes, and to strive toward a future defined by integrity and purpose. Amos' message invites us to see repentance not as a burden but as a gift, a chance to become the best version of ourselves and live a life that resonates with love, compassion, and justice. When we approach repentance in this way, it becomes a source of strength and resilience. By reflecting on our actions and committing to positive change, we cultivate a sense of peace that comes from living in alignment with our values. Repentance is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's a journey of growth, one that continually moves us closer to a life that honors both ourselves and others. Are we ready to embrace this journey? The benefits of self-assessment and personal transformation. Self-assessment is an essential practice for anyone seeking growth, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. It's the ability to look inward, honestly evaluate our actions, thoughts, and behaviors, and recognize areas that need change. This process aligns perfectly with the message of repentance Amos preached. Just as the prophet urged the people to reflect on their lives and turn away from sin, we too can benefit from pausing to assess ourselves and our choices. When we commit to self-assessment, we become active participants in our own transformation. This act of reflection helps us gain clarity about who we are and what we stand for. We begin to understand why we make certain choices and whether those choices align with our core values. By taking the time to reflect, we create an opportunity for personal growth and the development of greater self-awareness. Self-assessment is not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing practice. Just as our lives are constantly evolving, so too should our process of self-evaluation. Regular introspection allows us to adjust our course when necessary, especially if we've wandered off track. This continuous journey of self-discovery helps us identify patterns in our behavior, both positive and negative, and empowers us to make better decisions moving forward. For example, consider a person who often reacts out of frustration when things don't go their way. A moment of self-assessment might reveal that their frustration stems from unmet expectations or a fear of failure. With this understanding, they can begin to develop healthier responses, such as practicing patience or shifting their perspective. Instead of falling into old, harmful habits, self-assessment opens up the possibility for intentional change. Just like repentance, self-assessment is an act of vulnerability. It requires us to face the uncomfortable truth about our shortcomings and weaknesses. However, this vulnerability leads to healing and growth. By honestly acknowledging where we fall short, we create room for grace and improvement. This doesn't mean we are perfect, it means we are committed to doing better. Just as a plant needs pruning to grow stronger, we too need to assess ourselves regularly to ensure we're growing in the right direction. The benefits of self-assessment extend beyond individual growth, they positively impact the people around us as well. As we reflect on our actions and attitudes, we develop greater empathy and understanding toward others. We begin to notice how our words and actions affect the people in our lives. This awareness fosters healthier relationships and opens the door to reconciliation and forgiveness when necessary. Furthermore, when we take the time to assess ourselves, we become more intentional in our decision-making. We no longer act impulsively or based solely on emotions, but rather, we make choices that reflect our values and purpose. This alignment with our deeper self provides a sense of peace, as we know that our actions are guided by integrity and intention. Self-assessment also plays a key role in setting meaningful goals. When we take a step back and evaluate where we are in life, we can determine whether our current path aligns with the person we want to become. It allows us to set realistic, purpose-driven goals that will lead us toward our highest potential. This sense of direction and clarity is vital for creating a life of fulfillment and joy. In the context of spiritual growth, self-assessment allows us to evaluate our relationship with God. It gives us the space to reflect on our spiritual practices, whether we've been consistent in prayer, whether we've been living out our faith authentically, or if we need to make changes to deepen our connection. Just like Amos called the people of Israel to account for their actions, self-assessment encourages us to evaluate our own spiritual walk and make necessary adjustments. The process of self-assessment also supports resilience. When we face challenges or setbacks, we can look back at our self-reflection and the lessons learned to guide us through tough times. Knowing that we've already committed to growth helps us stay motivated, even in moments of doubt or difficulty. Self-assessment builds our inner strength, reminding us that we have the power to change and grow, no matter the circumstances. Incorporating self-assessment into our daily routines leads to a life filled with purpose, clarity, and intentionality. It empowers us to take control of our growth and transformation, while also allowing us to live more authentically and harmoniously with the world around us. The benefits are not just immediate, they're long-lasting, helping us cultivate a life that reflects our values, brings us peace, and leaves a positive impact on others. As we engage in the process of self-reflection and embrace the changes that come with it, we embody the very essence of Amos' call, to turn away from sin and toward a life of integrity and justice. Self-assessment is not only a path to personal growth but also a way to live in alignment with the greater purpose that God has set for us. Practical examples of Amos' message in our lives. Amos' message of repentance and justice isn't just a concept locked in ancient history, it's something that resonates deeply with our everyday lives. While the world may have changed since Amos' time, the fundamental issues of selfishness, corruption, and a disregard for justice are still very much present today. By applying his teachings, we can make meaningful changes in our personal lives and in our interactions with the world around us. One of the most immediate ways we can implement Amos' message is by taking a closer look at our relationships. Just like the people of Israel, we often face situations where we either turn a blind eye to injustice or allow selfishness to dictate our decisions. Think about times when you may have chosen convenience over doing what's right in a relationship, whether it's ignoring someone's needs because you're too busy, or letting small issues build up into bigger conflicts because you didn't address them early on. Amos calls us to be honest and confront these situations head-on. Instead of neglecting the responsibility we have for each other, we should strive to act with justice, compassion, and integrity. Take a moment to consider your interactions with others. Are you acting out of selfishness or serving others with a pure heart? In the workplace, this could mean ensuring that you treat everyone fairly, not just those who can benefit you directly. Amos rebuked the leaders of Israel for their corruption and selfish practices, and we are called to live differently, whether we are in positions of power or not. Practicing justice means we don't take advantage of others, and we stand up for fairness in both small and large ways. If you see an opportunity to help someone in need, whether that's offering assistance at work, standing up for someone who is being treated unfairly, or simply listening to someone who feels overlooked, you're embracing the spirit of justice that Amos preached. Another example of applying Amos' message is seen in how we handle material possessions. Amos condemned the wealth and greed that had overtaken Israel's leaders, pointing out that their accumulation of wealth often came at the expense of the poor and vulnerable. In our modern context, we too can reflect on how we use our resources. Are we generous with what we have? Are we conscious of how our consumption may impact others, especially those who have less? It's easy to get caught up in accumulating things, but the message of Amos challenges us to shift our mindset toward generosity, fairness, and social responsibility. By being mindful of how we use our wealth and resources, we begin to live in a way that honors God's command for justice and compassion. Amos also emphasizes the importance of personal integrity. In the prophet's time, the leaders of Israel had abandoned their moral responsibilities, and their actions were a reflection of their lack of respect for God's commands. Today, integrity in our personal and professional lives is more important than ever. We live in a world where dishonesty, shortcuts, and compromises are often normalized. But just like the people of Israel, we are called to act with honesty and honor in every area of life. Whether it's in our professional endeavors or personal dealings, making integrity a priority ensures we align with God's values and live with authenticity. A powerful example of applying Amos' message is in how we handle our mistakes. No one is perfect, and at times, we all fall short. The act of repentance, as Amos outlined, is not just about acknowledging wrongdoing but taking the steps to correct it. When we wrong others, we have the opportunity to apologize, make amends, and strive to do better moving forward. In our workplaces, schools, and families, we should embrace a culture of accountability. If we make a mistake, instead of brushing it aside or shifting the blame, we can take ownership and demonstrate true repentance, which leads to positive change. Moreover, repentance doesn't end with asking for forgiveness, it extends to actively working to ensure that the same mistakes aren't repeated. Just like Amos urged the Israelites to turn away from their sinful ways, we are also called to change our behavior. Real repentance involves a transformation of the heart, a shift from selfishness to selflessness, and a commitment to making choices that reflect justice, love, and compassion. The world around us often encourages a mindset of individualism and self-centeredness, but Amos reminds us that our actions have consequences for the community. The prophet called the people of Israel to account for their collective responsibility to one another. In our society, we too are responsible for each other. Whether it's standing against inequality, taking action in our local communities, or simply being kind and compassionate toward others, we can make a difference by living out the values of justice and repentance that Amos so boldly proclaimed. These examples show us that the message of Amos isn't distant or irrelevant, it's something we can apply to our lives every day. By living with integrity, practicing justice, taking responsibility for our actions, and using our resources wisely, we embody the transformative power of repentance. As we continue to reflect on the lessons from Amos, we are reminded that the journey of change starts with small, intentional actions. And with each step, we move closer to a life that reflects the love, justice, and righteousness of God. How to follow Amos' example today. Following the example of Amos requires a deliberate shift in how we approach our lives. Amos didn't shy away from confronting the tough issues in his society, and he certainly didn't fear speaking truth to power. His willingness to stand alone in the face of corruption, greed, and injustice calls us to do the same in our own time. If we want to emulate Amos, it begins with intentional steps that align our actions with the principles he stood for. The first step in following Amos' example is embracing the practice of daily reflection. Amos didn't just speak out for the sake of it, he was deeply in tune with God's voice and purpose. For us, this can be mirrored by taking time each day to reflect on our actions, choices, and the direction of our lives. Through prayer or meditation, we can seek God's guidance, examine our hearts, and listen for areas where we need to change. This daily reflection allows us to stay grounded in God's will, just as Amos did in his own life. Another important step is committing to justice and fairness in every aspect of life. Just as Amos called out the injustices he saw in Israel, we too are called to advocate for justice today. This may look different depending on our contexts, but whether it's speaking up for the marginalized, standing against inequality, or treating people with dignity and respect in all our interactions, we can live out Amos' call for justice. We are also encouraged to be proactive, not passive, in seeking justice, whether through small acts of kindness or larger efforts to challenge unfair systems. Living with a servant's heart is another way we can follow Amos. In his time, the leaders of Israel were called out for using their power for selfish gain rather than serving others. We live in a world that often promotes self-interest and personal ambition. Following Amos' example means living with humility and prioritizing the needs of others over our own desires. Whether in our careers, relationships, or communities, adopting a servant mindset can bring about deep personal transformation. It might be as simple as helping someone in need or as significant as advocating for the vulnerable. By focusing on the well-being of others, we mirror the heart of God. Lastly, repentance must be at the center of our journey. Amos constantly urged the people of Israel to turn from their sinful ways, and this call is just as relevant for us today. Repentance is not just an act of sorrow, it's a willingness to change and realign ourselves with God's values. It means recognizing when we've gone astray, asking for forgiveness, and making a conscious effort to live in a way that honors Him. Through regular confession, seeking forgiveness, and taking action to correct our wrongs, we reflect the transformation that Amos called for. By adopting these steps, we don't just read the story of Amos, we embody his message and apply it to our lives. The prophet's call to justice, repentance, and service is a roadmap for a life that's centered on God's will. In a world that often encourages selfishness and disregard for others, we are called to stand up, speak out, and live differently. Following the example of Amos isn't just about making big, dramatic changes, it's about daily, consistent choices that align with the values of justice, service, and repentance. As we've explored the life and message of Amos, it's clear that his call to repentance, justice, and self-examination is as relevant today as it was in his time. Amos was a simple man who, when called by God, didn't hesitate to speak truth to power, even when it wasn't popular. His example challenges us to reflect on our own lives, evaluate our actions, and make the necessary changes to live according to God's values. So, what will you do with the lessons of Amos? Will you embrace the power of repentance, commit to living justly, and lead a life of service to others? It's time to take a hard look at ourselves, just as Amos urged the people of Israel to do. Through daily reflection, intentional acts of justice, and a servant's heart, we can begin to embody the values Amos fought so hard for. Now, it's your turn to take action. Don't just watch and move on, let these lessons transform your life. If you found this video inspiring, take a moment to reflect on what you can change today. And, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights and inspiring content to guide your journey. Together, let's live the message of Amos and make the world a better place.